And I hope everyone is excited tonight. I know Fit Tech is something that you may not be familiar with, but I think after this conversation, you will be, and I think you'll find it super fun. So let's get into it. Okay, so welcome to my talk. We're going to discuss retail technology and the future of personalization. So, obviously, you guys are familiar with what personalization is in retail. It's when you go into a store and maybe they send you a little geotag that says, "Hey, Rachel, welcome back. So glad you're here. We have things 50% off." But it's a lot more than that. And so, what I get to do is figure out how do we relate clothing to the body, which seems like a no brainer. But if you've ever had the problem where you buy a size 10 in ASOS, and then you go to Zara and they have a size 10 and you're not a size 10, you're a size 8, you're this, that, and the third. That can be a big problem. So that's the type of personalization we're going to talk about tonight. And now, if you're interested in sustainability, this should be super helpful for you because I believe that the only way we'll be truly sustainable is in matching people to products on a one-to-one. So my motto is that everybody deserves their perfect fit, right? That means when you go into a store, whether you're a model, a regular person, whether you play sports, whether you're tall, whether you're petite, every single different type of body actually deserves their perfectly fitting garment. And so sometimes the industry has a hard time with this. So when we think about fit traditionally, we probably think about the anthropometric data, like measurements, right? So you're like, okay, well, when it comes to fit, I'm a size 8 or I'm a size 10 or I wear a 34, I wear a 36 or my neck is a 15. That's great. But there's a component to fit that we often forget about, which is preference. So even if you are a certain size, small, medium, or large, you may like an oversized hoodie. You may like to buy your denim one size down so that it fits snug, especially if you know it has spandex and all of these things. So when we're thinking about fit technology, what can make it a little bit complex is that it's not just about measurements and what size you are and your height and your weight. It's also about your preference. And this is kind of subjective and it makes it a bit more difficult. So let's talk about how much fit kind of affects our current process with shopping. If you look at this, this is just some of the most relevant and recent research data that has been collected around customers' dissatisfaction with their shopping process. And nearly all of the customers are basically saying, like they don't like to try on clothes, right? So nearly half of consumers hate trying on clothes, but the majority still go through the fitting process. I hate trying on clothes and I've worked in fashion and as a fit tech like remediation strategist, and it is just probably like the worst thing ever still. So we know that about a large percentage of apparel shoppers and footwear shoppers say that poor fit was their biggest reason for returning clothing. So when we're thinking about fit and returns, it's like, okay, people return, we hear about that all the time, but if you're constantly returning, it's going to make you hesitate to try a new product. It's going to make you hesitate to buy multiple sizes. Maybe you have a price constraint. Maybe you're just not interested in that. But fit is really one of the biggest problems that we're having in fashion right now. And we need all the smart brains in the world to help us to fix this. So we even know that it affects how people would shop. So we know that 58% of shoppers would buy more frequently if they could ensure a proper fit. So if I have a retail store and I know that maybe we're only selling X amount every month, I should also understand that the reason why we're not selling more than that is because people are having a hard time with fit. Now, I don't know if you guys remember when monkeypox first came out and they said that if you tried on clothes, you might get it too, right? So things like that, plus COVID, plus the fact that we don't want to go outside anymore, and the fact that honestly nobody's going to the mall. These are all reasons why people are not interested in getting up and going to an actual store to try things on. So if you're into fashion, if you want to work in retail, if you're thinking about merchandising and fit isn't top of your mind, you're going to fall behind, much like these other brands, which lose a lot of your big retailers like Macy's and Hudson Brands and Gap, for instance, have lost about 50% of their value in the last 5 years. So this is not a game. This is very important. So let's move on. So when I'm talking to you guys about the numbers as to why fit is important, let's go back to returns up here in this top left quadrant. We have about $62 billion of apparel and shoe returns every year, right? So that's 57% of footwear and 64% of apparel purchases. That's very disappointing. When I came out of school, I had an online store. We all know that sitting on inventory sucks, but also When people give you returns, that sucks too, because now you have to figure out what to do with that. No one wants to give you back their money. So that is a big deal. But what's even more important than that, but a lot of people don't talk about, and when we're thinking about warehousing, when we're thinking about, sending products or how you're going to merchandise based on location, you probably aren't thinking about the $50 billion of dead inventory. That's inventory that if you've ever went to a store and you saw something on a higher shelf, but you didn't even care to go look at it, that's dead inventory. And dead inventory is stored in the backstop, but it also happens online a lot. So when people are scrolling through your potential store and they see a garment, they're not quite sure if it fits them. They're not going to take the risk and just buy it in return. As we see, a lot of those products will never even get purchased. So it'll sit in your warehouse and now you have to mark it down or you have to give it to somebody. Dead inventory is a huge problem with fashion right now, and it's costing us a lot. So let's skip down to this particular bottom right quadrant where we have about 15 million tons of textile waste. So we hear a lot of talk about sustainability, right? Everyone's like, let's be more sustainable fabrics, slow processes, all of those things are great. However, if you don't find a way to stop people from making unnecessary returns and also reduce the amount of dead inventory, we are not going to be sustainable. It's not Shein's fault. It's not necessarily fast fashion. It's also our shopping behaviors, our hesitations, and the fact that we're not collecting enough data to really mitigate this issue. So let's talk about some of the bigger issues, just like we discussed. So first of all, fashion is a multi-sensory experience. That means you want to see it, you want to touch it, you like to try it on, you want to see what emotion it evokes. It engages multiple sensors in your brain. So this is one of the reasons why it's difficult to shop online. This is a reason why people can't really figure things out. They might leave something in the cart and abandon it. They might have a perfectly fitting item within a catalog, but they scroll right by it because they haven't been able to engage with it. Also, ignore these typos because that is shameful. But we're going to move on. You'll probably see that same typo again. So let's talk about supply and demand now, right? So I don't know if you know this about fashion, but most other industries have a reasonable supply and demand relationship, right? That works off of each other. But with fashion is different. We don't really have a way to measure the actual demand for fashion products, right? So we're overproducing, which is causing stores to close, which is causing, we have to put things on sale. We have to get rid of things. And we're always, instead of having 4 seasons, fast fashion has pushed us to having maybe 12 to 16 seasons. We're after all the trends. But what we're not doing is properly calculating what needs to be made and where it needs to be shipped. So we all know that people in the South are going to be shaped different than people in the Northwest, right? However, I don't know if you've noticed this, but brands send the same products regardless because they don't have a way to collect information from the consumer that would let them know, like, hey, let's shift X amount of sizes to these areas where they're being purchased the most. Let's shift the other sizes to another area so that we can kind of balance the supply and demand there. And finally, decentralization. So what that really speaks to as it relates to the conversation we're having is that we're in a consumer-centric economy, which means all of the trends and everything that's going on is coming from the customer up, which is really difficult if you're a fashion house, because traditionally fashion houses kind of dictate what the trends are, what the colors are, what's going to happen. But now it's different. We're in a consumer-centric economy, which means the consumers have to determine and dictate those things. And oftentimes by the time fashion figures it out, they're behind, which is why your favorite brand probably didn't get hip to a trend until many months later. And by then it's over. So there's a lot of misconception about what is fashion technology, right? So right now you're probably thinking of NFTs, which, if you invested in those, I'm sorry, it kind of seemed like a cool thing, not so much now. It'll be back, I'm sure. Avatars. So a lot of people have a lot of technology that's paper doll technology where you can see your favorite 3D Gucci jacket on your 3D avatar, which is great if that's what you're into, right? But however, it doesn't tell you the size. It doesn't tell you the fit. You can't get your peer's opinion on how it looks on you, which is how people traditionally like to shop. So that's not really helpful. And then we have the metaverse. All of these brands are going into the metaverse and doing what, right? Dressing your avatars or having some cool event, but then you have your items sitting in your closet. You have no idea what to do with them. So there's a lot of misconceptions that fashion tech is maybe some type of science fiction, or it's the thing on Clueless. I don't know if you guys are even old enough to know the Clueless movie where she has like this virtual closet and it spins around. It's supposed to be really cool. Probably not, no problem. But what fashion tech actually is a set of best practices and knowledge. It's applications, processes, and methods to help reduce pain points. So it's not all computer science. It's not all avatars and robots and they're going to take our jobs and stuff like that. Sometimes it's like that if it creates more efficiency, but most of the time it's about improving on existing processes through a method. The most important thing that I try to talk to our clients about, because it's really fun to sit in the intersection of fashion and tech, because you're double-minded. You can both think creatively and you can also think about how to solve a problem. But technology is all about solving problems. And there's a big creative component with that, because if we knew how to do things in the traditional way worked, then we wouldn't be having some of these massive problems or returns or dead inventory. But clearly, there's something off. So it requires creative thinkers just like yourself, people who can both understand the needs of a person as well as how to meet those needs effectively. So some of the issues that shoppers face that we help to resolve with fashion technology, specifically and fit technology, is having too many choices and options. So this is really dangerous because if you go to ASOS, for instance, and you're looking literally for a leather jacket, and you know in your head the leather jacket that you want, but you go out there and you might see 1,000 leather jackets. Maybe the first 100 you can quickly identify, kind of, okay, I don't want these. But maybe the next 100 start to look alike. And then the next 100 after that, you're just getting tired. You don't like the model. You're over it. That creates a fatigue with your brain where you will not make a decision. And it's really cool that everything's going online. It's really awesome that we have this opportunity where more than about 30% of everything is being bought online as it relates to fashion. But you have to remember that your shoppers need a more personalized experience or they're going to get exhausted. These issues of never ending feeds of that really just means like you're going to different stores, you're trying to find something that's for you, but you see a feed in a catalog of everything but what you want. Now, of course, you can filter it down, but how often do those filters really get you what you want? Are they asking you exactly what you're looking for? Can you submit a picture? Can it pull the idea off your brain? No. But if it did that, that would be fantastic. The next problem that we see a lot of is the one and done. So let's say you're on Instagram and you find a really cool page and you're like, I want to shop there. And you pick out what you think your right size is and you get it and it's wrong, right? So we've all seen those things of what I ordered versus what I got. That's a big deal because it's really hard to validate what you're going to get because it's not in relation to anything. You don't know the fit model it's on. You don't know the model that's wearing it. You have no idea how the brand is standardizing its sizing. So there's a lot of mystery. But one thing for certain, you probably won't go back to a brand that you took a risk on and that gave you a bad experience. Now, of course, because the customer is always right, that's cool. But if that happens on a scale with thousands of people, you have brands that have mismatched their product to the wrong people who now won't come back and will probably inform their circle that you just shouldn't shop there. Now, if you think about our dead inventory issue, something like this contributes greatly to it. But let's not forget our returns issue. Yes, a lot of people return things, but how often do you buy something? It's not right and you don't return it. You just let it be and you don't go back. So this is why clothing waste is a big issue because it creates a lot of other problems. Also, we have omni-channel engagement. So one day I decided to go into Neiman Marcus and I was already logged in on my phone and I went in and the customer person had no idea that on my phone, I was ready to check out. I just wanted to see something in person. So the sales associate comes up, they're kind of rude. They take forever. They don't ask me what I'm looking for. The whole experience was very disconnected because I simply wanted to know where the item was in store. They weren't able to tell me where the item was in store swiftly. They didn't understand that I was ready to buy. I had no way to engage kind of my community at that time to ask someone else for their opinion. And so the whole experience went out of the door because retailers have the opportunity for omni-channel engagement, but they're not actually utilizing it in a way that works with the customer. And if you've ever had an experience similar to that, then you probably are now understanding more succinctly what fashion technology is about. So, fashion technology is quite complex, especially when it comes to fit and sizing technology. First of all, there's no one technology that can really solve all your problems yet by itself. It still takes user input, it still takes existing data sets. It takes a lot. So, what I've done in this chart, and I made this a very long time ago, is that when you're thinking about fit tech and sizing tech, there's three components you need to think about first. First, there is the data, raw data. So that's customer data and or feedback. That could be sizing. That could be, where's this customer located, right? So we're in Chicago. This customer always buys at this price point. This customer always shops at Nordstrom. This customer also likes these other brands. So all of these pieces of data normally exist for a retailer, but they exist in a silo, which means they don't have someone that can come in and say, hey, give me your data sets. And what I'm going to do is produce some patterns that helps you understand your customers much better. Second, if we go down here, we see measurements, right? So that's what we talked about before, anthropometric data. When you go into a fitting room, you have picked up an item. There's data in that item. So we know that item's color. We know how that item is classified. We know the size of that item. What we don't know is the why you picked it up. So that's the previously mentioned data. And we don't have your particular measurements, right? So we know that you picked up a large shirt, let's say, and you brought it into a fitting room, which is great. But one thing that we would like to better understand is how often are you buying large shirts from this brand? What is your actual measurement and size? Outside of a sales associate asking you your size, has anyone ever asked you, hey, do you have an average of your denim size that you wear in other places? No, because that's a weird question. You probably wouldn't want to answer it. But what we need is an understanding of your anthropometric data and measurements. And here's why. So let's say you take the large into the room. We understand the product, although that data is siloed. We don't understand you, right? So we don't have your measurements. But let's say for whatever reason, the sales associate noticed that you were actually a small, right? So she might tell you, hey, that's the wrong size. Let me have that. Well, what if your preference in this sweater is to buy a large because you're comfortable with that? So if we were feeding that data from the sales associate's point of view, the sales associate would have assumed that you picked up the wrong item. The actual item is probably correctly sized, but the way you want to interact with it is different. So you have to think about all these components and perspectives when we're just trying to capture data of how a person is interacting with the product and why. So this is why this chart has data, measurements, and preferences. And as you can see on the data and measurement side, there's a lot of tools that can help with mass customization. So there's parametric pattern grading technology. There's custom clothing technology. There's return analysis that can help us to better understand your measurements versus the data we have on the products. And then there's maybe virtual fitting tools. And not every retailer quite has virtual fitting tools. So then if we think about preference and measurements only, we have user input technology. So let's say you're in the fitting room and you give them the data that these are all my sizes. This is what I'm buying. And yes, I like it. Or you try it on and you give it a thumbs up. Or we know that you tried that on, you took that off the shelf, you walked it into a fitting room, you switched it for a smaller size, and then you purchased it. Even having that data alone can help to build information on our customers that did not exist. So when you're thinking about if you want to build a store of the future, you have to think about how do we connect these siloed pieces of data in a way that helps us to meet the needs of our customer. So lastly, if you combine the data and the preference piece, you're really doing customer journey mapping, you're enhancing your UX and UI as we discussed, or maybe you have a virtual stylist feature like a Stitch Fix or something like that. The type of technology that you will either develop or integrate completely depends on your customer type. So is this a customer that is fashion forward where, they're not too much worried about size, they just want the latest? Is this a customer who is really particular about size because they're an NBA player and they're 7 feet, so they have to have things that fit them before they care about the brand? Or is this a customer that, has to have a work outfit, they're open, but they're restricted by a price point? you have to think about your customer types before we can even think about what technology do we give them. Then you have to think about their behaviors. Are they coming in store more? So is this a corporate man who's getting custom suits because the type of technology he needs is completely different than if it's a stay-at-home mom who's trying to shop for 3 different teenagers that's in her house and she doesn't want to leave the house at all. So next, you want to think about your organization structure. Are you a retailer? Are you direct to consumer? Are you a couture designer? Are you working with a big manufacturer, or are you hand making your items? All of these things will determine what type of technology is needed best. Then you can consider your purchase journey. Is the person who's buying this, are they looking at it online and going into the store? Are they going into the store to try a couple pieces on and then they're buying it online? Are they relying on their friend groups? Are they shopping using social commerce, which is like, I bought this on Instagram, or I bought this after I saw it on TikTok? That goes into channels. So are they on their phone? Are they on social? Are they in store? As you can see, all of these things create a very complex system of trying to figure out what type of technology do we build and what type of technology do we integrate. But depending on the type of person you are, you might be able to solve these problems in a better way. So lastly, you want to consider the desired experience. If you're sneaker shopping, maybe an AR tool is what's best for your customer. Maybe they already know their size, or they'd like to see how will this sneaker look with this outfit, and then they want it delivered and shipped same day, maybe through a courier service or something. All of those things are small little technology updates that you can make that will make your experience better depending on the type of customer you have. So with that, I want you all to always remember that customer centricity is so much better than the technology itself. You have to know what your customers want and what they're willing to buy. So for instance, I'm sure you guys all remember, or maybe not, a long time ago, the Google glasses came out. And Silicon Valley thought that it would be so cool to give people super dorky glasses in which you could do all this stuff on your phone, and people were going to love it. They had no idea that not only would people hate it, but it looked stupid. And although that may seem really shallow, fashion customers are a little bit shallow. When it comes to the motivations as to why you like something, there's not always a deep meaning behind it, right? There's a small group of people that were probably like, I could absolutely use Google Glasses because I work in a lab and I'd like to see double images. But you have to put the needs of your customers on what they want and always create for them, design for them, and do for them in everything that you have going on, because customer centricity is even more important than whatever technology you think will solve their problem. In a sense, I like to tell people to think about it like you're dating your customer, and your customer is a person with a lot of options. So you don't have a lot of time to get it wrong because they're not married to you. They're not engaged. You guys don't have kids. You're just dating. So the first time you get it wrong, it kind of diminishes your value with what the customer's expectation is. That could be with the wrong technology or the wrong experience. If you're giving avatars to a person who doesn't care about avatars, they're just here for the organic way that they like to shop for vintage clothing, you're creating a disconnected experience that's going to harm your relationship with your customer. So you have to think about them as you want to establish a long-term relationship. So you want to listen to them and then do what it is they're asking. So the keys to dating your customer and figuring out tech is really simple. Tech can seem complicated, but these things are easy. You listen to them. So whether that's you listen to reviews or you're looking at hauls, sometimes I watch a lot of fashion hauls to get a better sense of where the disconnect is with sizing or what language is being used to describe it. Then you want to communicate. You want to have open feedback channels. So whether you're asking questions on social and you're collecting that information, or you're putting up reviews on your website and so on and so forth, you want to make sure you establish that connection and you keep it going. So for the sake of time, we're going to skip that and I'm going to skip over that because I can come back to it. Let's talk about the types of technology and what they do, because this is the exciting part, right? So on each slide, there's going to be 2 examples. So if you have questions or anything like that, throw them in the chat and I'll answer them pretty much once we get to the end of this. But let's get into it. So these are some of my favorite type of fit and size technologies that you should be thinking about, whether you want to work in tech, build a technology, or work in fashion at all. So 3D design technology is changing how we do everything. As you see here, it really gives you the ability to create clothing without having to spend money on creating a sample, and samples can run you about $1,000 per sample. You don't have to send it back and forth to a factory to get the stitching right, to get the color right. You can literally create it on a 3D avatar of your choice. That avatar can have different sizes or body types. If you realize that, hey, I want to make a line of skirts for petite women, for instance, you can absolutely do that using this, so you can get a better sense of how the fabric will lay and what it will look like. What's really awesome about 3D tech is that it's gotten so photorealistic that you can see different textures, and it gives you heat mapping so that you can definitely understand where it would be too tight. Tension mapping, where it would be too tight so that you can adjust it. This is super important if you're trying to be a fashion designer and you want to start out lean. Maybe you don't have $50,000 to invest to create samples and get them wrong and have to send them back and forth. And tools like Clo3D are only $80 a month. So it's not expensive. You can literally do it as a student. You can spend like maybe one weekend kind of getting acclimated to the tool, and then you'll have a really good understanding of how to use it. And if you're already a designer, it kind of matches your flow of being able to drape and cut out patterns. So next, we have body shape analysis tools. Now, these tools just came into existence probably in the last 10 years. What they really are is that you have these companies that went and did body scans on hundreds of thousands of people. They also took data such as where do you work, what's your race, what's your height, what's your weight, what sizes you wear. And the reason why this is so important is because you are able to build your 3D avatar. So you can say, show me the body of a woman who is 28 and wears a size 6. Show me one that wears a size 10 and show me one that wears a size 12, and they're all the same height. So if you wanted a better understanding of maybe different segments of the population as a designer, this is super helpful because they have this plethora of body types that they scan so that you can search it using filters that have to do with your end result. So even if you were thinking about making a line of clothing for, let's go back to our example of NBA players. Right now, when you have big and tall sizing, you have to grade, and it's kind of like a box, but it's like just because you get taller doesn't mean you get wider. So this would help you to see, show me 5 different types of people who are all 7 feet. Show me them with the different sizes that they're in, because people come in all shapes and sizes. Or if you're thinking about making adaptive clothing, this can be helpful as well. So body shape analysis tools help you to get really granular about your pattern making, as well as your grading, as well as which portion of the population your products are best for, so that you can communicate that to them and there's no guesswork. Next, we have parametric pattern grading. These are tools that allow you to basically have mass customization. What you do is you upload one base size pattern, and you also upload your potential customer or your model's measurements. And the computer program takes the measurements and it creates custom patterns. So a long time ago, actually still now, people have to do this by hand, and that is why it takes a custom suit like 6 weeks to be made, because they have to take all of your measurements, take your measurements, put it onto a pattern, and then figure it out. This does it in no time, and then you can make small adjustments. So you're kind of like plug and chugging what you want a custom pattern to look like. This is great if you're into custom design and you want a way to get products to your customer faster. And these are also inexpensive tools. You can also send this to your manufacturer and they can pre-cut items if you know you have repeat customers. That way you save on fabric yardage and you save a lot of time and money. So to the right, we have 3D body scanners. Body scanners are getting super sophisticated now because you can definitely use them on your phone. And they're pretty accurate down to about, I think, like 0.5 inches, which can make a big deal if you're doing custom clothing, but it's actually super easy if you're just trying to match people to products and understand body types. You should definitely think about 3D body scanners. You can work for a company. You can build your own 3D body scanner. It's a lot of ways that you can use this and utilize this. One of the companies that I work for has a 3D scanning component that Fenty just bought so that people could get the right bra size. So there's a lot of opportunity with body scanning. And it's not just the big big machines anymore. They're getting smaller, smarter, and sharper every day. So the next type of technology is going to be our in-store interactive technology. And so heat mapping, a lot of people are like, what does that have to do with size and fit in general, right? But what heat mapping tells us is where are people spending the most time in your store and why. So if you've ever gone into a store, maybe you'll notice that it has more than 4 styles on a 4-way. So you might look through a couple and then you'll notice, oh, this is a whole new type of shirt back here. I had no idea, right? It may have seemed like a good idea to merchandise it like that because maybe you want to inventory out. But what if your heat mapping shows you that people spend the least amount of time there because they're confused? Or maybe they're not spending enough time there because it's too many things. What you want to do is use heat mapping as a way to understand the traffic around your store. Where people spend the most time, you would put your best items, or you would put items you want to sell the most. And where people sell the least time, spend the least time, you may want to shift your store. So for in-store, this type of technology can help you basically deduce, okay, where are people spending their time? Why? And how can we make an experience that kind of is better for them? Next, we have magic mirrors. I love magic mirrors because they're super smart. This is an example from the Adidas store. When you go into one of the flagship Adidas stores in New York, the item that you take then populates on the screen, and it's asking you what size you have. And if you like it, you can communicate with the sales associate. You can do a lot of wonderful things with it. If you have a store, this type of technology can really make or break you based on the example that I gave earlier about the siloed pieces of data, right? Because now you're keeping track of what's going in, coming out, and what's getting sold, and you can begin to better understand the why behind it. The technology that makes that possible is RFID scanning and tagging. So these little chips are the old school version, but nowadays they have it smaller. It's in your tag so that the scanner can read it when it comes into a certain area. And it knows that, hey, it knows the garment brand, size, how much it costs, and how it moved around your store. And this is super helpful if you're ever wondering, like, hey, every time someone tries on this men's denim, they always switch it out for a smaller size. So what would you tell your sales associates to do? Ask them their size, go down one, then we can make a sale. Also, let's translate that information online just in case people don't have access to that. So that's super important. Also, what's really awesome that you can kind of mix together is the geolocation services. So if you've ever pulled up into a city, let's say like I just flew back into New York today, and sometimes you'll get someone that says, hey, your favorite Sephora store on Broadway is having a sale. And you're like, oh my God, thanks, forcing me to spend money. That's kind of still a great way to kind of use RFID tagging outside of your store in a way that can really create an experience that's really great for your customer. Or it can let you know, like, hey, your package just got really, really close, or your package just hit the last mile facility. So it'll be there by the end of the day, because people are always anxious about their products. So little things like that are super helpful. So next you have AI, which is my favorite. I really love artificial intelligence because it does so many wonderful things. There's always machine learning where the computer is starting to learn your preferences and it offers you things based on them. Now, I know you've had a shopping experience where it's like, hey, do you like this? Awesome. Well, what about this random item that you've never looked at? And you're like, absolutely not. That's a poor example of machine learning. But a better experience is saying, hey, I have her receipts because she's opted into sharing her receipts. I have her Facebook profile. I have her Instagram. I can scan what items she wears the most and kind of use Google Lens to cross-reference that. So now I can make suggestions based on her actual style versus random suggestions based on what we think. That is why machine learning can be very useful for suggestive shopping. We also have predictive behaviors. So in the same way, you take the similar data sets and it says, if we know that Jessica has bought 14 leather jackets in this same kind of style, we could probably show her that when she first comes onto our retail site so that she's more likely to buy. Or let's show her items that she's more likely to buy. That's super helpful. And it kind of gets into like your virtual stylist tools, which people love when you get right. They hate when you get wrong. So you got to be careful with that. Visual search is an awesome component. I don't know if you guys have heard about Google Lens, But now Google Lens will allow you to take a picture of a clothing item and it'll show you similar ones so that you can shop based on your taste. That's super important for people who can't quite describe their style or what they like, because who can really do that? Sometimes you can't tell somebody what you're looking for all the time, but you might have a picture of it. You might have, pinned it on Pinterest. This is a really good tool that you can use if that's the way your clients like to shop, or if that's how you like to shop. And then there's tagging. So what's happening now is because people want to really engage in a circular economy, items are being tagged so that you can see how many times it's been sold or resold, what's wrong with it, and how you can also recycle it, which, although that type of technology is new, it's super useful. And if we're going to be more sustainable, things like clothing passports will absolutely be necessary. Again, we talked about AR, which is a really cool example. It works best with sneakers. They're moving now into beauty and makeup, so you can find your perfect fitting makeup. And it is not quite for size, but it works really well for preference, which is super important. And then there's also virtual try-on. Again, virtual try-on is still kind of paper dollish, but if you're the type of person that wants to see maybe how your wedding dress is going to look with a different hairstyle or whatever, that might be a better use case for that than putting it in a store where somebody absolutely wants to see the size or understand size and fit better. So even understanding your targeted consumer, as we talked about before, will help you to determine what technology is best, right? Because this will be great for weddings. It's bad for hey, I want to see how this bathing suit fits me, because there's no way that you'll know that. So in addition to those things that we named, simple technology that exists is simply reviews. It's still the number one way and reason why people want to shop. It's why you go on Amazon, why you click the 5-star and the 1-star, and you do your comparison to figure out, okay, what do people hate and love about this? We do everything based on user-generated content and our peers, which is what reviews and peer marketplaces are really about. It's we trust our peers more than we trust a brand or a retailer. So it's important for brands and retailers to integrate that technology in a way that makes it easy to do reviews and easy to read them. User-generated content. So we all know influencers exist right now because of user-generated content. And it's something that if you have a store or a brand, you're going to want to incorporate. Very simple technology, but it creates trust, which helps to create better sales, less returns. And then social shopping, which is happening now, which is now called social commerce. So social commerce is a really big deal because you have to, a lot of people are starting their shopping process through social media and no longer just going to the brand. People aren't just ending up on Nordstrom. They're actually starting on social. They see someone that they can identify with the product. They're seeing how that person interacts, and then they go and make a purchase or a sell. So that's super important. So again, just to review, these are the ways that technology is integrating and changing fashion. Fashion is decentralizing, where consumers are first. It's the end of the mall era, as we know with omni-channel shopping. People want to shop online more. They don't really want to go into the store. So it's creating great opportunities for you guys to be innovative and think of ways to marry technology and fashion. We have super inefficient supply chains. So if you haven't noticed, vanity sizing by itself is an indication that our supply chains and the traditional way of sizing things is totally wrong. Fast fashion has changed our expectation, but it's also changed our waste issue. So we have to become more conscious of how do we reduce returns and dead inventory, and how are we upcycling, recycling, and kind of interacting with our peers. Influencer marketing is a big deal. We just talked about social commerce and how important it is. Consumer preferences and behaviors, knowing that is the key to having any type of sustainable business supported by technology. You have to know your customers. It's really fun to know your customers. There's so many ways to do it, but it has to be done before you can make a decision about what tech you want to wow them with. And also knowing your customers, they'll tell you exactly what tech to build. If you listen well enough, they will tell you exactly what type of technology is needed. And your job is to just make it easy to use. which is why we have ease. And then lastly, there's new ways of thinking. People are interacting with each other differently, whether it's good or bad. Some good examples are peer-to-peer marketplaces where people want to sell products to each other, or people that want to do vintage shopping. Maybe some bad ways of thinking is that I can't wear the same outfit twice because it's already on social. So what do? Maybe an AR tool would be great for that girl who wants to wear the same thing, but maybe make a couple of changes so no one knows. However, the world of fashion tech and fit technology, matching people to products, is so vast. I'm pretty sure that you all will find your own route to understand it or recognize it in your everyday shopping. So your homework is to stay informed. One of the ways you can do that if you're interested in fashion technology is to create Google Alerts. So whether Google Alerts are basically a way for the internet to aggregate information to you. I don't know if you use them, but I use them all the time. And I use tags like fashion tech or 3D fashion or fashion innovation, whatever it is that you're interested in. And it'll bring stories to your phone every day so that you can learn something new in the world of fashion tech if that's what you want. So with that, I want to say thank you guys for listening. I know I went through that fairly quickly. I hope it was interesting, and I would love to answer any questions you might have. If you want to email me, you can absolutely email me if you're interested, or text me, that's fine. I'm actually building a tool right now. So it's kind of like a peer shopping where you can see somebody who's basically your similar size, has your similar size, and your similar style, and you can shop their closet based on that. So you get their example of how something fits. And we think by building this tool, it'll help to make shopping more intuitive. So if you want to be a part of that, you can absolutely email me and ask me questions about it. Otherwise, that's our presentation. I hope that wasn't too long.